Hey guys, tonight we're plunging headfirst into the brutal, untamed world of medieval China, a land where survival isn't guaranteed, and the landscape itself seems to dare you to keep going. Picture this: you stand at the edge of a sprawling desert, the sun hammering down like a relentless blacksmith, forging your misery in real time. Sand stretches out in every direction, a sea of golden death, while far-off mountains stab at the sky, their peaks veiled in a haze of menace. Your mouth is dry, your skin prickles with heat, and the air tastes like dust and desperation. Welcome to medieval China, where the geography doesn't just challenge you, it tries to break you. Good luck out there, you're going to need it. Before we dive deeper, take a second to like the video and subscribe if you're into this kind of journey. I'd appreciate it, but only if you mean it. Oh, and drop a comment with your location and local time. It's always neat to see where you're at while we explore this together. Now dim the lights, maybe crank up that fan for a little ambient vibe, and let's get lost in this unforgiving terrain. You're teetering on the brink of the Taklamakan Desert, a place so brutal its name might as well be a warning label. Enter here and kiss your future goodbye. The dunes roll out before you, endless and indifferent, shimmering under a sun that doesn't care if you live or die. The heat presses down heavy and thick, turning every breath into a chore. Your lips crack like old parchment, and the sweat evaporates before it can cool you. Water, a distant dream. The rare oases are guarded like treasures, and if you don't know the way, you're just another skeleton waiting to happen, bones bleaching under that merciless sky, a silent testament to the desert's reign. But the desert's only half the story. Swing your gaze westward, and there they are, the Kunlun Mountains, a jagged fortress of rock and ice. You don't climb these for fun. You climb them because you have no choice. The trails twist like a drunkard's scrawl, narrow and crumbling with sheer drops that promise a quick end if your foot slips. Snow clogs the passes half the year, and when it melts, it triggers landslides that can bury you alive. Bandits haunt the shadows, their knives glinting with bad intentions, and the wildlife wolves. Leopards bear seize you as a walking meal. You're not just navigating a mountain range, you're dodging a gauntlet of death. Why would anyone stick around in a place like this? Because this geography isn't just a backdrop, it's a sculptor chiseling medieval China into something fierce and unique. Those towering mountains and sprawling deserts double as shields, keeping invaders at bay. The northern steppes might teem with nomadic raiders, but good luck crossing the Gobi Desert or scaling the Himalayas to reach the heartland. It's a natural fortress, but it's a double-edged sword. You're cut off two villages, isolated trade routes, treacherous messages taking weeks to crawl across the empire if they arrive at all. You're on your own out here, and that solitude breeds both resilience and rivalry. Take the Silk Road, for instance. You've heard the name, glamorous, exotic, a lifeline of commerce stitching China to the world. But walking it, that's a different beast. You load your camels with silk, jade, and spices, your dreams heavy with profit, and set out across the Gobi, or Taklamakan. The wind howls, sand stings your face, and the horizon mocks you with its emptiness. Bandits strike when you're weakest, vultures circle when you falter, and the desert itself swallows caravans, whole bones, goods, and all. Yet the promise of wealth pulls you forward, a siren song through the wasteland. Some make it, most don't. You can almost hear their whispers on the breeze. Turn back, fool. Then there's the Yellow River, slicing through the north like a lifeline with a temper. You depend on it. Its water feeds your crops, coaxing rice and millet from the stubborn earth. But don't get too cozy. It's nicknamed China's sorrow for a reason. One day, you're tending your fields, the next, you're underwater, the river bursting its banks with no warning. Homes vanish, cattle drown, and your harvest is a memory. The silt it leaves behind clogs your canals, starving the land for years after. Floods and famines dance hand in hand here, and you're caught in the middle praying to gods who don't seem to listen. Even the nice spots have teeth. Down south, the Yangtze River plains roll out green, and fertilea farmers, paradise right, sure until you factor in the crowds. You're shoulder to shoulder with neighbors scrabbling for every inch of arable land. Resources thin out fast, and warlords bicker over the scraps, their armies trampling your fields. Disease festers in the humid air, and mosquitoes swarm, buzzing with malaria. Paradise comes with a catch, and you're the one paying the price. Scholars still bicker about this geography. Was it a gift or a gut punch? Some say it's a shield, cradling Chinese culture in isolation, letting it bloom away from prying eyes. The Great Wall might get the credit, but these natural barriers did the heavy lifting. Others argue it's a shackle choking trade and stunting growth. New ideas trickle in, slow, if at all, an expansion. Forget it, too much effort, too little reward. It's a tug-of-war with no winner, just like the landscape itself. For a wild twist, chew on this whispers. Claim the Taklamakan hides a lost city, swallowed by sand centuries ago. Picture Ida, glittering oasis, bustling with life, until a storm or curse buried it deep. Some say it's cursed that stepping inside traps you in an endless loop, wandering dunes till you drop. No proof, of course, but it's a juicy tale. Maybe one day you'll be the one to stumble on it, or maybe you'll just add to the desert's collection of lost souls. Living here toughens you up, no question. You adapt or you die, simple as that. The land forges you into something hard, clever, and maybe a little mean. You learn to read the sky, ration the water, and watch your back. But the geography's just the opening act. The real brutality lies ahead, woven into the social and political threads of medieval China. The feudal system, the serfs, the lords, they're waiting for you. And they're not much friendlier than the desert. You wake to the faint, raspy crow of a rooster, the sound cutting through the stillness of pre-dawn like a dull blade. The air is damp and cool, heavy with the scent of wet earth and the faint tang of manure drifting from the fields. Your bed is a flimsy mat of straw prickly against your skin, spread across the hard dirt floor of your hut. The walls a crumbling mix of mud and straw, let in drafts that chill your bones, and the roof well, it's more of a suggestion than a shield leaking whenever the sky decides to weep. You sit up, your body groaning from yesterday's labor, and fumble for your breakfast, a thin slop of millet gruel tasteless and barely enough to quiet your growling stomach. Welcome to your life as a serf in medieval China, where the days are long, the work is brutal, and freedom is a word you've heard but never touched. Stepping outside the world is still cloaked in the gray haze of early morning. The fields sprawl before you, endless rows of rice paddies and wheat, their edges blurred in the mist. Your bare feet sink into the cold, sticky mud as you grab your tools, a splintered wooden plow, a dulled sickle, a basket that's seen better days. The work begins, and it's relentless. You bend and strain, plowing furrows into the earth, planting seeds with cracked hands or harvesting crops until your back screams for mercy. The sun climbs higher, burning your neck, while the overseer looms nearby, his whip coiled like a snake ready to strike if you dare pause too long. Sweat stings your eyes, your muscles tremble, and the weight of it all, the land, the Lord, the endless cycle presses down on you like a millstone. Rest? That's a fairy tale for someone else. And then there's the Lord, your feudal overlord, the man who holds your fate in his manicured hands. He lives up on the hill in a manner that might as well be a palace compared to your hovel. While you're out here breaking your back, he's sipping rice wine and nibbling on roast duck, surrounded by silk and servants. You're lucky if your hemp tunic holds together through the season. He's got robes that shimmer like water. His word is law. His whims, your reality. You don't just work the land, he owns it, and by extension, he owns you. You're not a slave. Not technically. No one's haggling over your price at market, but you're not free either. You're tethered to this soil, and if the Lord sells it, you're part of the deal bundled up like a sack of grain. This whole setup, this feudal system, has roots that dig deep into China's past all the way back to the Zhou dynasty. That's the mainstream history bit for you. It started when kings handed out land to nobles, like party favors expecting loyalty, and soldiers in return. Those nobles passed chunks of it down to lesser lords, who then leaned on serfs like you to keep the whole machine running. It's a tidy little pyramid, emperor at the top, you at the bottom, and everyone in between stepping on your neck to climb higher. You owe the Lord most of your harvest. Half, if he's feeling generous, more, if he's not, and then there's the corv, labor. Those delightful unpaid stints building his roads or digging his canals. Say no. Good luck with that. The whip's not just for show. Freedom's a distant dream here. You can't pack up and leave, not without the Lord's blessing, and he's not exactly handing out travel passes. Your kids. They're born into this to inheriting your mud-caked destiny. It's a life sentence with no parole. Sure, some lords might toss you a bonelet. You keep an extra handful of rice, or look the other way, if you sneak off for an hour. But most are vultures picking your bones clean. You're stuck, and the social hierarchy makes sure of it. It's like being trapped in a cosmic group project where you do all the work and someone else gets the credit, except this project lasts forever. But here's a quirky little twist you do get. To keep a tiny slice of your harvest, a pitiful scrap the Lord doesn't bother to claim. It's not much, barely enough to keep your ribs from poking through your skin, but it's yours. On a good year, you might even barter a few grains for a new tool or a rag to patch your clothes. It's a faint flicker of control in a life where you've got none a whisper of maybe I'm not just a beast of burden. You hoard it, stretch it, make it last, because waste is for people with options. And yet there's more to you than toil. In some villages, serfs like you pull off secret gatherings, hushed, hidden a middle finger to the Lord's rules. You huddle in the dark, sharing tales of better days, or croaking out a song, your voice rough but alive. Maybe you even shuffle your feet in a clumsy dance, the mud squishing underfoot. It's dangerous charade. The overseer catches wind you're in for it, but it's worth it. Those stolen moments remind you there's a spark inside buried under the dirt, an exhaustion refusing to die. Still, the big question lingers, and historians love to bicker over it. Did serfs like you ever have a shot at climbing out of this muck? Or was the system an unbreakable cage? Some argue it was iron-tight a life with no exits, while others point to flukes. As serf turned soldier, a lucky break, under a lenient lord. Most days, though, it feels like the doubters are right. You're a cog in the feudal wheel, and it's not built to let you roll free. The debate's open, but from where you stand, freedom's just a pretty story they tell the kids. You've got to laugh, though, or you'll cry. You swap jabs with the others in the fields. Lords, new tax. Guess he ran out of gold to wipe his nose with, and smirk at the absurdity of it all. Work harder, they say. Sure, I'll just plow my way to the throne. It's dark humor, the kind that grows in the cracks of despair, but it keeps you sane. Without it, you'd drown in the unfairness, the endless grind, the Lord's greed, the system that's got you pinned like a bug on a board. Its medieval tech support no solutions. Just have you tried turning your life off and on again? You're tougher than they think, though. Day after day, you drag yourself up, lace your worn-out shoes, if you've got any, and trudge back to the fields. The sun rises, the sun sets, and you keep going. A good harvest, a quiet night, a child's laugh. Those are your wins, small but fierce. You're forged in this fire, and you endure because you must. There's no out, just through. But the futile grind isn't the only shadow over your life. The air's thick with whispers of war armies, clashing invaders, storming villages burning. You've seen the smoke, felt the tremor of hooves in the distance. It's coming, and when it hits, you'll be swept up in it, ready or not. The fields might be your prison now, but the battlefield's about to make them look like a fond memory. You wake to the distant sound of drums, a rhythmic thumping that seems to echo through the very earth beneath your feet. It's a sound you've grown accustomed to, yet it never fails to send a shiver down your spine. The drums mean one thing: war is coming. Again. Living in medieval China, you're no stranger to conflict. The land has been scarred by centuries of battles, each leaving its mark on the people and the landscape. From the fall of the Han Dynasty to the rise of the Tang, and through the tumultuous periods in between, warfare has been a constant companion. During the Three Kingdoms period, for instance, the land was divided among warring states, each vying for supremacy. The battles were fierce, with armies numbering in the hundreds of thousands clashing on vast battlefields. The common people caught in the crossfire often bore the brunt of these conflicts. The reasons for these conflicts were manifold. Sometimes it was a matter of territorial expansion as rulers sought to extend their domains. Other times it was internal power struggles with ambitious generals or court officials attempting to seize control. And then there were the external threats, such as invasions from nomadic tribes like the Xiongnu, or the Mongols, who saw the wealth of China as a tempting prize. For you, a humble farmer or artisan, these wars meant uncertainty and fear. Your village could be razed to the ground, your crops destroyed, and your family scattered or killed. Conscription was another grim reality. You might be forced to leave your home and fight in a war you had no stake in, wielding weapons you barely knew how to use. Imagine one day, as you're tending to your fields, you see a plume of smoke rising in the distance. Your heart sinks as you realize it's coming from the direction of your village. You drop your tools and run. But by the time you arrive, it's too late. Your home is in flames. Your neighbors are fleeing, and soldiers, whether they're the enemy or your own kingdom's troops, it hardly matters, are pillaging what's left. But amidst the chaos, there are moments of unexpected humanity. Perhaps a soldier spares your life, or a stranger offers you shelter. These small acts of kindness are like flickers of light in the darkness, reminding you that even in the midst of war, compassion can still exist. The military was a dominant force in medieval China. Generals often held more power than civilian officials, and martial prowess was highly valued. This militaristic culture permeated daily life. Even in times of relative peace, the threat of war loomed large, shaping everything from government policies to social norms. One of the most infamous conflicts was the An Lushan Rebellion during the Tang Dynasty. What started as a revolt by a disgruntled general escalated into a full-scale civil war that lasted for years, resulting in millions of deaths and widespread devastation. The rebellion weakened the Tang dynasty significantly, contributing to its eventual decline. Take, for example, the Battle of Fei River in 383 AD during the period of the 16 Kingdoms. The former Qin, with an army of over 800,000 men, faced off against the Eastern Jin, who had a mere 80,000. Despite the overwhelming odds, the Jin emerged victorious thanks to superior strategy and the overconfidence of the Qin commander. The battle was a turning point, but for the soldiers on both sides, it was a day of bloodshed and carnage. Or consider the Mongol invasions in the 13th century, which eventually led to the establishment of the Yuan dynasty. The Mongols, under leaders like Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan, were relentless in their conquests. They employed brutal tactics, such as massacring entire cities that resisted to instill fear and submission. For the Chinese people, this meant living under the constant threat of invasion and subjugation. Life as a soldier in medieval China was no less harsh. Conscripted from the peasantry, you were often ill-equipped and poorly trained. Your armor, if you had any, was made of leather or padded cloth, offering little protection against arrows or swords. Weapons were basics, spears, halberds or crossbows, and maintenance was your responsibility. Battles were chaotic with little regard for individual life. You were just another body on the field, expendable in the grand scheme of things. Disease and famine often followed in the wake of war, further decimating populations. Armies on the march would requisition food and supplies from local villages, leaving the inhabitants with nothing. Starvation became a common plight, and with it came desperation and lawlessness. Yet amidst this turmoil, there were also stories of heroism and resilience. Legends of warriors like Yue Fei, who fought valiantly against the Yurshan invaders during the Song dynasty, inspired hope and patriotism. His loyalty and martial skill became the stuff of folklore, a beacon of light in dark times. But for most, war was not about glory or honor. It was about survival. You learned to adapt to hide your valuables, to flee at the first sign of trouble. Communities banded together, forming militias for self-defense, though these were often no match for professional armies. The psychological toll was immense. The constant state of alertness, the fear of the unknown, the grief of losing loved ones, all of these weighed heavily on your mind. Sleep was fitful dreams haunted by the specters of war. Women, too, were profoundly affected by the constant warfare. While men were away fighting, women had to take on additional responsibilities, managing households, farms, and businesses. They also faced the risk of assault and abduction by enemy soldiers. Some women even took up arms themselves, joining the fight or defending their homes. One notable figure is Hua Mulan, the legendary woman warrior who disguised herself as a man to take her father's place in the army. While her story may be more myth than fact, it reflects the reality that women were not passive victims. They were active participants in the struggle for survival. In times of siege, women and children were often the most vulnerable. When food ran low, they were the first to suffer from starvation. Disease, too, took a heavy toll with outbreaks of plague or dysentery sweeping through besieged cities. Yet women also played a crucial role in maintaining the social fabric. They were the keepers of tradition, passing down stories and customs to the next generation. In the aftermath of war, they were instrumental in rebuilding communities, nursing the wounded, and caring for orphans. Warfare in medieval China wasn't just about brute force. It also involved strategy and sometimes superstition. Generals consulted astrologers to choose auspicious days for battle, and soldiers carried talismans for protection. There were even tales of armies using kites to send messages or to drop incendiary devices on enemy camps. Historians still argue over the true extent of the brutality in medieval Chinese warfare. Some contend that the records are exaggerated, while others believe they understate the horrors. The debate continues with new archaeological findings and interpretations of historical texts adding fuel to the fire. As if the constant threat of war wasn't enough, you also had to navigate a legal system that was as unforgiving as the battlefield. In medieval China, the law was a double-edged sword meant to maintain order, but often wielded with a heavy hand. So as you lay down to sleep, the distant drums still echoing in your ears, you can't help but wonder, will tomorrow bring peace, or will it be another day of strife? In medieval China, the answer was often the latter, and survival was a daily struggle. Imagine waking up in your modest little hut, the kind where the morning sun sneaks through the cracks in the wooden walls like an uninvited guest. The air is sharp and cool, carrying the faint aroma of rice simmering in the communal kitchen down the way. You step outside, rubbing the sleep from your eyes, and see your neighbors already at it, some hunched over in the fields, others lugging water from the well in buckets that creak with every step. The kids are kicking up dust their giggles, cutting through the stillness like a fleeting rebellion against the day's grind. It's a picturesque scene, almost cozy, until you feel it, that prickly tension hanging in the air, the kind that makes you check your posture and lower your voice. Everyone's walking on eggshells, and not because the harvest is late. No, it's the law, the ever-watchful, ever-unforgiving shadow that looms over every move you make in medieval China. Here the law wasn't just a rule book. It was a philosophy, a way of life that gripped you tighter than your straw mattress ever could. This philosophy had a name: legalism. Born in the chaos of the Warring States period and polished to a ruthless shine by the Qin dynasty, legalism was built on a charmingly cynical idea. People are selfish little gremlins. Who'll only behave if you dangle a big enough stick over their heads. Forget warm, fuzzy feelings or moral persuasion. Legalism said, order comes from strict laws and punishments that make you think twice before stepping out of line. And oh, did they mean strict? The legal code was like an encyclopedia of don't you dare covering everything, from grand crimes like murder and treason to petty slip-ups like forgetting to bow low enough to the local tax collector. It wasn't just about keeping the peace, it was about making sure everyone knew who was boss, and that boss was the state. Let's talk punishments, because legalism didn't mess around. Steal a loaf of bread to feed your rumbling belly. Say goodbye to a hand or a foot if the judge was feeling extra grumpy. Mouth off about the emperor, maybe grumble that his new palace looks like a gaudy pile of bricks. That's treason, my friend, and it's off with your head literally. They loved a good public execution back then, turning it into a grim spectacle to remind everyone else to keep their noses clean. Even the small stuff could get you in hot water. Late on your taxes, expect a flogging or a stint breaking rocks in some far-off labor camp. Disrespect an elder or fail to snitch on your shady neighbor exile might be your new vacation spot. The punishments were harsh, often wildly out of proportion to the crime, and applied with the kind of cold consistency that left no room for "but I didn't mean it." Fear was the glue holding this society together, and it stuck like mud on your best tunic. Living under this system was like tiptoeing through a field of landmines while blindfolded. You had to watch every word, every gesture. A careless remark about the weather could be twisted into a jab at the emperor's divine mandate because, of course, he controls the clouds too. Right gossip was a luxury you couldn't afford. It was safer to nod and smile than risk someone ratting you out. Trust was as rare as a full granary in a drought, and friendships came with a side of paranoia. You got good at playing the game, saying one thing, meaning another, keeping your real thoughts locked up tight behind a mask of obedience. The authorities were everywhere, their eyes sharper than a hawk's, and you never knew who might be listening. It wasn't just about staying out of trouble. It was about surviving a world where one wrong step could cost you everything. Now here's where legalism gets downright quirky. The laws didn't just stop at behavior. They got into the nitty-gritty of daily life with an obsession that make a modern bureaucrat blush. Take cart axles, for example. The state decided every cart in the empire had to have axles of the exact same width. Why? So they'd fit perfectly into the standardized ruts on the roads, keeping everything uniform and efficient. No room for creativity here. Your cart couldn't be a smidge wider or narrower. It had to be just right or else. This wasn't some random whim. It was part of a grand plan to control every detail from the coins in your pocket to the script you scratched on bamboo slips. The Qin dynasty even standardized weights measures and the written language, all to iron out regional quirks and make the empire one big obedient machine. It's almost impressive in a wow, they really thought of everything kind of way, until you realize you're the one stuck following the rules. So was legalism brilliant or bonkers? Historians still bicker about it like kids fighting over the last dumpling. On one side, you've got the pragmatists who say it was a necessary evil. China was a sprawling mess of warring factions before the Qin came along, and legalism's iron fist was what stitched it all together. They argue it brought stability, unified a fractured land, and set the stage for centuries of centralized rule pretty handy when you're trying to herd millions of people across a continent-sized empire. On the flip side, the critics call it a soul-crushing nightmare. They say it smothered individuality, killed creativity, and turned people into cogs in a joyless wheel. Why dream big when dreaming at all could get you in trouble? The jury's still out, and honestly, it's a tough call. Was it the tough love medieval China needed, or a straitjacket that squeezed the life out of its people? You decide. I'm just here to tell the story. Here's the kicker. You couldn't even sneeze too loudly near a government official without risking a conspiracy charge. Accidentally step on the emperor's shadow. Better hope it's a cloudy day or you're toast. Okay, maybe that's a stretch, but not by much. The law was everywhere. An uninvited guest at every meal. A whisper in every conversation. People lived with their hearts in their throats, always glancing over their shoulders, always wondering if today was the day they'd slip up. It was exhausting, sure, but it kept the wheels turning, at least until something bigger came along to shake things up. And shake things up it did, because for all its rules and rigidity, legalism couldn't legislate away the real wild card. Like the diseases that crept through villages silent and unstoppable. No amount of flogging could scare off a fever, and no edict could standardize a plague out of existence. In the next section, we'll dive into how medieval Chinese society wrestled with these invisible foes, from brewing bitter herbs to whispering prayers in the dark. The law might be ruled the land, but sickness had a way of reminding everyone who was really in charge. You wake to the sound of coughing, a wet rattling noise that seems to echo from every hut in the village. The air hangs heavy with the scent of smoke curling up from fires lit to chase away evil spirits, though it does little to cover the sour stench of sickness. Your neighbor Old Wang has been lying still for days now, his skin a canvas of angry red pustules. The local healer shuffles by, muttering incantations under his breath, and stirring a pot of tea that smells like damp earth and despair. Nothing seems to help, but then again, what could? This is the world of disease and medicine in medieval China, where the rigid laws we spoke of last time, those harsh codes that governed every step, offered no shield against the invisible enemies creeping through the air, the water, the very walls of your flimsy home. Diseases didn't care about your status as a serf or a scholar. They came for everyone with a ruthless kind of fairness. Smallpox was a regular guest, leaving its calling card in the form of oozing sores that either killed you or marked you for life. Dysentery slithered through the villages, carried by water, more mud than liquid, turning your guts into a battlefield of cramping agony. Then there was the bubonic plague, a silent assassin, hitching a ride on the backs of fleas and rats, capable of emptying a bustling town in weeks. Tuberculosis lingered like an unwelcome relative, its victims coughing up their strength in bloody spurts until they faded away. Without sanitation or the miracles of modern medicine, these illnesses were less a visitor and more a permanent resident, their presence a grim lullaby sung over cradles and graves alike. So what did you do when sickness knocked at your door? You turned to the healers, the keepers of traditional Chinese medicine, who spoke in hushed tones about balancing your body's energies, yin and yang qi, the 5 elements swirling in some cosmic dance. Their weapons were herbs pulled from the earth and mashed into brews that could make a grown man wince. Ginseng promised vitality, licorice soothed a scratchy throat, and ginger wrestled with nausea, all steeped into teas that tasted like punishment more than cure. It was a guessing game, really. Sometimes the bitter sludge worked, easing a fever or calming a cough. Other times, it just gave you something to complain about while you waited to see which way fate tipped. The healers had other tricks too, ones that might make you squirm just thinking about them. Acupuncture was a favorite, those slender needles pricking your skin to nudge your chi back into line. It wasn't as bad as it sounds, a quick sting, then a strange, dull hum in your flesh, but it was no picnic either. Moxibustion brought the heat literally, with mugwort smoldering close to your skin, its sharp, smoky scent filling the room like a dragon's breath. And cupping, that was the one where they slapped heated cups onto your back, sucking the skin up into little purple welts that were supposed to pull out the bad stuff. You'd walk away looking like you'd lost a fight with an octopus, but some swore it made them feel lighter, freer, even if only for a day. Medicine wasn't just about the body, though it was a dance with the spirit world too. Plenty of folks believed sickness came from angry ancestors or mischievous spirits, so healing often meant calling in the big guns, Taoist priests with their talismans and chants filling the night with the clang of gongs and the whisper of incense. Buddhist monks murmured prayers, their voices a soft thread, weaving through the chaos, while shamans twirled and pounded drums, trying to coax protective spirits into the fray. It was a noisy, smoky affair, less about science and more about hope, a belief that if you could just appease the unseen, the fever might break, the pustules might fade. In a way, it was comforting until it wasn't. But don't think it was all superstition and guesswork. There were sparks of something clever lighting up the dark. Take variolation, for instance, a daring little stunt that started as early as the 10th century. Healers would grind up dried smallpox scabs into a fine powder and blow it up your nose, giving you a mild case on purpose to trick your body into fighting off the real thing later. It wasn't foolproof. About 1 or 2 out of every 100 didn't make it through, but it worked often enough to spread beyond China's borders a rough draft of the vaccines we know today. It's a mainstream slice of history proof that even amid the chaos, people were groping toward something smarter, something that might outlast the next plague. And if that sounds wild, wait until you hear this quirky little tidbit. Some folks turned to corpse medicine in their desperation. Yes, you heard that right. Bits of the dead, like ground-up bones or dried flesh, were stirred into remedies thought to pass on some lingering vitality to the living. Picture yourself choking down a gritty spoonful, hoping the essence of someone else's life would patch up your own. It's the kind of thing that makes you glad for a modern pharmacy. But back then, it was just another roll of the dice in a game where the stakes were always high. Now, here's where the scholars start bickering. And it's a debate that's still simmering today. Just how good was all this traditional medicine? Some wave the flag for its wisdom, pointing out how it focused on keeping you well before you got sick. How herbs like ginseng have science nodding in approval even now. Others roll their eyes, calling it a mishmash of folklore and luck, arguing it held back real progress with its talk of spirits and energies instead of germs and cells. The truth probably lounges somewhere in the middle. Some of it worked, some of it didn't, and a lot of it depended on whether you believed in it. It's an open question, one that keeps the history books buzzing. And maybe that's the point. It's less about the answer and more about the story. Even so, no amount of herbs or prayers could fully guard against the storms of disease, especially when life threw in extra punches. Famine, for one, was a cruel partner to sickness, starving your body until it couldn't fight back. A hungry village was a sick village, and a sick village was a step away from empty. In our next chapter, we'll wander into that bleak landscape, famine and starvation in medieval China, where the land turned stingy, the stomachs growled louder than the wolves, and disease found an all-too-willing ally. It's a tale of hunger so deep it gnawed at the soul, a reminder of just how fragile life could be when the harvests failed and the nights grew long. You're still reeling from the last section, where disease ran rampant through your medieval Chinese village, and the so-called medicine was about as useful as a Band-Aid on a broken leg. But just when you thought things couldn't get worse, the universe decided to throw famine into the mix. Picture this. You're standing in the middle of your village, the marketplace that once buzzed with life, now eerily silent. The air hangs heavy with the sour stink of decay, a not-so-subtle hint that the crops have failed again, third year running, because why not your stomach's growling like it's auditioning for a lion's role, and your neighbors shuffle by their faces, all sharp angles and hollowed-out eyes. Welcome to famine and starvation, where the only thing emptier than the storehouses is your hope. Famine wasn't just a one-off guest star in medieval China. It was a recurring character showing up uninvited thanks to nature's temper tantrums. Floods from the Yellow River, nicknamed China's Sorrow, and for good reason, would drown your fields, leaving nothing but soggy ruin. Droughts would turn the land into a cracked, dusty wasteland, and locust plagues, because apparently the bugs wanted in on the action, would strip anything green that dared to grow. Then there were the wars, with armies stomping through your crops like they were auditioning for a medieval version of Stomp. And don't get me started on the government corruption, and poor planning meant the rich had pantries stuffed with grain, while you were lucky to snag a handful of millet. It's like the universe conspired to make sure your dinner plans were permanently canceled. The fallout, brutal doesn't even begin to cover it. Starvation and malnutrition turned you and your neighbors into walking skeletons too weak to fight off the diseases we talked about last time. Perfect timing, right? In the worst moments, whispers of cannibalism floated through the village, a horror story you'd rather not believe, but couldn't quite dismiss. Society started fraying at the edges. Bandits prowled the countryside, looking for anyone desperate enough to rob, and rebellion sparked as people decided they'd had enough of starving under someone else's boot. The laws and punishments from earlier sections, they didn't stand a chance against a hunger this deep. Let's zoom in on some real history to ground this nightmare. The Great Famine of 1337 during the Yuan dynasty was a standout disaster. Millions died, and the streets turned into open-air morgues. The government, already a mess from infighting, just shrugged and left you to figure it out. Or take the Tang dynasties and Lucian rebellion in the 8th century war. Trashed the land famine followed, and entire regions were wiped clean of people. These weren't flukes. They were the norm, a cycle of misery that kept spinning through the centuries. But you're a survivor, aren't you? Even in this mess, people got creative. You'd see folks chewing on tree bark like it was gourmet boiling grass into a sad soup, or get the seeding clay to trick their stomachs into shutting up. Some swore by weird fixes, like chowing down on a white horse's flesh to fend off starvation. Spoiler, it didn't work, but points for optimism. It's almost admirable, this stubborn refusal to give up, even if it meant eating things that make a modern foodie faint. Scholars love to bicker about how bad it really was. Some say famine slashed the population so hard, entire provinces turned into ghost towns. Think post-apocalyptic vibes, minus the cool cars. Others roll their eyes and say the body counts are overhyped, blaming spotty records from a time when no one had the energy to play census taker. It's a historical tug of war with no winner, just a lot of dusty books and raised eyebrows. And yet, even in this grim slog, there was humor, dark sure, but humor nonetheless. Well, at least we don't have to argue over the menu tonight, someone might quip, cracking a weak smile as their ribs poked through their tunic. Or maybe they joke about stone soup where the recipe was 1 part rock, 2 parts desperation. It wasn't funny. Funny, but it kept you saying a little spark of defiance against the void. Close your eyes and feel it. The village is a sensory assault. Emaciated bodies slump against mud walls. Kids whimper for a crust of something, anything, while the wind carries the reek of rot from unburied dead. The fields stretch out barren, the silence broken only by the creak of a cartwheel or the faint bark of a starving dog. It's the kind of scene that sticks with you, a visceral punch that says life here wasn't just hard, it was a daily battle not to disappear. Here's the kicker though, famine didn't hit everyone the same. That rigid social hierarchy we've been hinting at. It meant the elites, lords, officials, the lucky few could hole up with their stockpiles, sipping tea while you fought over a rotten turnip. Their granaries were fortresses guarded by soldiers who'd skewer you before letting you near a grain. Down here at the bottom, you're scavenging, begging, maybe even stealing, if the hunger outweighs the fear of a whipping or worse. It's a divide that's starting to fester, and you can feel the resentment bubbling up ready to spill over. So here you are, staring at your villages, skeletal remains, the hunger, a constant ache in your gut. Famines peeled back the polite mask of society, showing you just how brutal things can get when the basics run dry. But it's not the end of the story. Next time, we'll climb the ladder of that rigid social hierarchy, where the rules were ironclad and the gap between you and the top dogs was wider than the Yellow River itself. For now, take a breath, if you can stomach the smell, and let the weight of this sink in. You wake to the sound of roosters, crowing their shrill calls, slicing through the pre-dawn stillness like a knife through tofu. The first light of day creeps through the cracks in your mud brick walls, casting faint shadows on the dirt floor. Your bed is a thin mat of woven straw, prickly and unforgiving, and the air is sharp with the chill of early morning. You can hear your family stirring nearby, your parents, siblings, maybe even a grandparent or two, all crammed into this humble hut that's more draft than wall. The day ahead looms like a mountain endless steep and unforgiving. After the famines you've endured, the gnawing hunger from Section 6 still lingers in your bones. But now it's time to face another beast, the rigid social hierarchy that pins you down tighter than a landlord's tax demands. Step outside, and the village is already humming with life, though it's the kind of hum that's more resigned sigh than cheerful buzz. Women trudge to the well, their backs bent under the weight of empty buckets, while kids dart between huts chasing each other with the kind of energy only the young and blissfully ignorant can muster. The air smells of damp earth and the faint tang of manure. A reminder that your world is built on the land, and the land doesn't care about your dreams. You're a peasant in medieval China, and that means you're stuck at the bottom of a social pyramid so stiff it makes a bamboo stalk look flexible. The lay of the land your place in the pyramid. Let's map this out, since you're probably too busy dodging starvation to sketch a flowchart. At the very top sits the emperor, the son of heaven, his every word law, and his mood swings capable of toppling dynasties. Just below him are the nobles and officials, the guys who get to wear silk robes and sip tea while plotting each other's demise. Then come the scholars, the brainy bunch who've memorized enough Confucian classics to make your head spin. And finally, there's you, the peasant part of the vast sweaty base holding this whole wobbly structure up. You till the soil, plant the crops, and hand over most of your harvest to keep the higher-ups fed and happy. It's like being the unpaid intern of society, except there's no promotion in sight and the Wi-Fi's non-existent. In theory, Confucian ideals rank peasants above artisans and merchants because you feed the empire. In reality, you're still dirt poor, and the nobles don't exactly roll out the red carpet for you. Your life is defined by your birth, and this social ladder has no rungs for climbing unless you count the occasional splinter as progress. Daily grind life at the bottom. Your days are a blur of back-breaking labor. From sunrise to sunset, you're out in the fields coaxing life from the stubborn earth. The soil clings to your hands like a possessive X, and the sun beats down with the enthusiasm of a drill sergeant. You joke with your fellow peasants that the only thing growing faster than the weeds is the tax collector's greed, but it's the kind of humor that's more grimace than grin. After the famines you've survived, the yield from your tiny plot is barely enough to feed your family, especially after the local lord takes his cut, and trust me, he's not skimping. You're left with just enough millet and vegetables to keep you alive, but not enough to let you dream of anything better. It's a delicate balance, like trying to juggle rice grains in a windstorm. Leisure, education. Those are luxuries for the folks higher up the pyramid. Your primary concern is survival, and every ounce of energy goes into making sure there's food on the table or at least on the mat. The examination system, a distant dream. You've heard whispers of the imperial examinations, a series of tests that could theoretically let a clever commoner like you climb into the ranks of the scholar officials. Pass those, and you'd trade your hoe for a fancy hat and a government gig. It's like the medieval version of American Idol, but with less singing and more calligraphy. The catch education costs time and money, two things you don't have. Your days are spent plowing, not poring over scrolls, and your nights are for collapsing in exhaustion, not cracking open the Analects. Even if you could study, the exams are brutal, designed to weed out all but the most dedicated or well-connected. It's like cramming for the SATs, but instead of 4 years of high school, you've got 4 decades of Confucian classics to memorize, and the proctors might be on the take. Born to lose family and lineage. Your fate was sealed the moment you took your first breath. Your family has been peasants for generations, their lives etched into the same furrows you now tend. Your kids will inherit this legacy of toil, their futures as predictable as the seasons. Marrying up, not a chance. Social boundaries are as rigid as the emperor's morning routine, and crossing them is about as likely as teaching a pig to recite poetry. You're locked in place, a cog in a machine that's been churning for centuries, and the only way out is 6 feet under. The other side life, up top. Meanwhile, the nobles and officials live a life so different it might as well be on Mars. They lounge in courtyards shaded by peach trees, their robes shimmering like water under the sun. Servants flit about serving roast duck, glazed with honey, and steamed buns as light as clouds, while you're lucky to get a bowl of millet that doesn't crunch too much. Their kids are tutored by the finest scholars, learning to pontificate on filial piety, while you're teaching your little ones how to spot a ripe turnip. It's a world of silk and jade, and you're not invited. The closest you'll get is maybe glimpsing a sedan chair passing by its curtains drawn tight to keep your peasant eyes out. Here's a fun fact. In the Tang Dynasty, officials strutted around in robes color-coded by rank. Purple was for the top dogs, think of it as the medieval VIP pass. You're stuck with drab brown, the color of the mud you slog through daily. Fashion wasn't just about style. It was a billboard shouting your place in the pecking order. Was it really that rigid? Historians still argue over whether this hierarchy was as unbreakable as it seemed. Some point to outliers like Wang Mang, who climbed from obscurity to snag the throne, though his reign crashed and burned faster than a paper lantern in a storm. Others say such cases were rare and usually ended badly, proving the system wasn't built for climbers. From your spot in the fields, it's all noise. The walls around your class feel as solid as stone, and you're not packing a chisel. Holding on in what's next? You cope with small victories, a day without rain, ruining the crops, a night the tax collector skips your door. You swap stories with neighbors, maybe about old Liss Pig, wandering into the magistrate's garden, and chuckle at the thought of the emperor stubbing his toe on a golden stool. It's not much, but it keeps the bitterness at bay, like soy sauce on bland rice. But don't get too cozy. This order doesn't hold itself together. It's enforced with an iron fist. Step out of line, and the consequences are swift and brutal, making your empty stomach seem like a minor gripe. In the next section, we'll dive into the gruesome world of medieval justice, where punishments are as creative as they are cruel, and the executioner's schedule is tighter than the emperor's grip on power. Picture this: the sun dips low, painting the village square in shades of gold and shadow. You hear the creak of wooden carts rolling by, the faint chatter of merchants haggling over silk, and the smoky tang of roasted chestnuts wafting through the air. It's a typical afternoon in medieval China until it's not. The crowd shifts their murmurs, fading into an uneasy hush. You crane your neck and spot the source, a man hands bound kneeling in the dust. His back is a mess of red welts, and beside him stands an executioner, whip in hand, looking like he's about to audition for the villain in a period drama. Welcome to Justice Medieval Style, where the punishment isn't just harsh, it's a public spectacle. That rigid social hierarchy we explored last time, it wasn't just a suggestion. Step out of your lane, and the law's got a brutal way of putting you back in place. In this world, the legal system isn't some dusty scroll tucked away in a library. It's alive, loud, and in your face. Rooted in legalism, a philosophy that says order trumps everything. It's less about mercy and more about making sure you know who's boss. The state doesn't mess around. Punishments are quick, creative, and designed to stick with you, sometimes literally. Whether it's a flogging for mouthing off or something far worse for bigger sins, the goal is clear. Keep the machine of society running smoothly, even if it means greasing it with a little blood. Let's ease into the lighter stuff first. Well, as light as it gets. Flogging's the bread and butter of minor offenses. Forget to pay your taxes on time. Insult the wrong official. You're tied to a post shirt off and whacked with a bamboo cane or leather whip. The strokes, anywhere from 10 to 100, depend on how much you've annoyed the powers that be. By the end, your back's a canvas of pain, and you're hobbling home, rethinking your life choices. It's like a medieval version of Time Out, except the timeout chairs got spikes and a bad attitude. Step up the crime ladder, and things get grisly. Mutilations where the law really flexes its imagination. Caught stealing, kiss a hand goodbye. Chopped clean off with a blade that's seen more action than a butcher's cleaver. Gossip about the emperor. They'll yank your tongue out faster than you can say free speech. It's not just punishment. It's branding, marking you as a warning to others. The 5 punishments take it further, tattooing your face, slicing off your nose, lopping off limbs, and more, all wrapped up in a neat little package of agony. It's the kind of thing that make even the toughest modern gangster wince. And then there's the main event, execution. If you think beheading sounds bad, quick swing head rolls done. Wait until you hear about lynching, the death by 1,000 cuts. Reserved for the big no-nos like treason or killing your parents, it's exactly what it sounds like, a slow, deliberate carve-up until you're begging for the end. The executioner's a maestro, drawing it out while the crowd gawks, some clutching their kids closer, others taking mental notes for their next nightmare. Your head might end up on a spike afterward, a grisly billboard shouting, "Don't try this at home." It's justice as theater, and you've got front row seats. You're probably wondering about the process. Surely there's a trial, a chance to plead your case. Sort of. The system's obsessed with confessions, guilt's assumed, and they'll get it out of you one way or another. Torture's the star here, bamboo slivers under your nails, hot irons on your skin, or a good old-fashioned beating until you sign the dotted line. Magistrates don't care about your alibi. They want compliance, and they've got the tools to make it happen. It's less courtroom drama and more medieval interrogation. Simulator, no lawyers, no jury, just you and the pain. Sometimes the punishments are so bizarre, they're almost funny if you squint. Take the guy caught faking an official's title. He's paraded around in a wooden collar, a clunky neck billboard screaming fraud to the neighborhood. Or the petty thief, sentenced to lug a massive stone on his back, barefoot over jagged rock sits, like a twisted fitness challenge with zero prizes. These aren't just about hurting you. They're about humiliating you, turning your mistake into a village-wide meme. The executioners, oddly enough, are the rock stars of this grim show. They're skilled, methodical, even proud swinging a blade or cracking a whip with the precision of a surgeon. Some take pride in a clean kill. Others savor the slow burn. The crowd's there too, not just for the blood, but for the break-a-rare moment of drama in a life of rice fields and rules. It's like medieval Netflix, minus the subscription fee. Did it work? Scholars still bicker about that. Some say the terror kept crime down hard, to argue with a missing hand as a deterrent. Others reckon hunger and despair could push anyone past caring law or no law. Picture a starving farmer eyeing a rice sack as a whipping worth a full belly. Sometimes, yeah, it is. The system's brutal, sure, but it's not foolproof. Humans are messy like that. It's all relentlessly fair, though. Rules are rules, and the consequences don't discriminate unless you've got cash to grease palms. But that's another tale. You know where you stand or kneel if you've crossed the line. The law's a constant companion, lurking like a shadow, ready to pounce if you slip. As the square clears out, the dust settling around the blood-stained post, you feel the weight of it all. This isn't just about punishment, it's about control, etched into every lash and scream. But don't despair yet. The state's got more tricks up its sleeve. Next up is corps labor, where you're roped into building walls, digging ditches, or hauling stones until your back's as broken as your spirit. It's the empire's way of saying, "Oh, you survived the whip. Great, grab a shovel. Stick around. We're just getting started." You wake to the clang of a gong, a sound that slices through the pre-dawn chill like a rude alarm clock you can't snooze. The air reeks of sweat dust and something faintly sour, probably the gruel they'll pawn off as breakfast. Your back's already groaning from yesterday's toil, and your hands look like they've been through a medieval version of CrossFit. You're not home anymore. You're in a labor camp roped into corvée labor by the state. After the gruesome punishments we talked about last time, floggings, mutilations, and all that cheerful stuff, you know the drill. Keep your head down and your shovel moving or else. So you haul yourself up, muscles screaming, and shuffle into line with the other bleary-eyed workers. Welcome to corvée labor, where the emperor's grand plans mean you're the one breaking your back for free. Corvée labor is the state's way of drafting you into its big construction gigs. Think canals, roads, or walls that make the Great Wall look like a weekend DIY project. In medieval China, it's as routine as a rice harvest and about as optional as breathing. You don't get a paycheck. Your compensation is the privilege of serving the empire, which doesn't exactly buy you a new ox or patch your roof. The work is endless, dawn to dusk. You're swinging a pickaxe, lugging rocks, or digging until your hands are raw, and your spine feels like it's auditioning for a hunchback role. Overseers hover like vultures, whips at the ready, and you keep digging, because slacking off means a beating or worse. It's like the world's worst unpaid internship, except instead of coffee runs, you're hauling dirt. Let's talk about the Grand Canal, a historical flex that scholars can't stop gushing over. Kicked off during the Sui dynasty, this beast of a waterway stretches over 1,000 miles, linking China's north and south like some ancient superhighway. It's a trade booster, an empire unifier, and a logistical win. But for you, it's just a muddy trench and a sore back. You're out here swinging tools under a sun that's basically a giant oven, while overseers crack whips like they're auditioning for a villain role. Sure, it's a mainstream fact that the canal transformed China, but it's built on the sweat, and bones of folks like you, thousands of them, in fact. Next time someone calls it an engineering marvel, you might want to ask how many lives it cost. Not everyone takes this lying down, though. Here's a quirky nugget: some clever souls try to dodge corvée duty with moves straight out of a con artist's playbook. You hear tales of guys rubbing nettles in their eyes to fake blindness, or smashing their own fingers to skip the draft. It's grim. But when the alternative is months of backbreaking labor with rations that make a stray dog turn up its nose, you get it. There's even a legend about a man who traded his last chicken to bribe an official, only to end up digging and clucking mad when the deal fell through. It's the medieval equivalent of faking a cough to skip work, except the stakes are higher and there's no Zoom to hide behind. The grind isn't just physical, it's a soul crusher too. You're far from home, bunked in a camp with a bunch of strangers who smell as bad as you do. Your bed is a straw mat on dirt, and the food, a bowl of watery gruel that's gone before you can say seconds. The camp's a symphony of snores, coughs, and the occasional sob, all wrapped in a stench that knock out a horse. You're lucky if you get through the day without collapsing, and the only break is when you pass out at night, too wiped to dream of anything but freedom. Still, there's a silver lining, or at least a rusty one. You bond with the other workers over shared misery. You swap stories about your kids, crack dark jokes about the overseers, bet he'd whip the emperor if he didn't like the tea, and fantasize about the day you'll walk back to your village. It's not a party, but it keeps you sane, keeps that pickaxe moving through the muck. Now here's where the eggheads start arguing. Was corvée labor a brilliant necessity or a colossal flop? Some historians say it's the secret sauce behind China's big projects. Without it, no Grand Canal, no Great Wall, no empire worth bragging about. Others scoff, calling it a cruel mess that bled the peasantry, dry-tanked farming, and fueled rebellions. Standing there caked in mud and sweat, you're not exactly feeling the greater good vibes. Scholars still duke it out over this one, and honestly, it's anyone's guess whether the payoff was worth the pain. Oh, and it's not all canals and walls. Sometimes the emperor gets fancy. Take the Ippon Palace, a Qin dynasty pipe dream, so over the top it'd make a tech mogul jealous. You're dragged off to build it acres of halls, fake lakes the works, only for it to sit unfinished or get trashed by the next regime. Thousands die for it, and for what a ruin nobody remembers. It's like pouring your life into a sand castle just for the tide to roll in, except the tide's a dynasty with a torch. Getting to the worksite is its own ordeal. You're marched for days, feet blistering on rocky paths, throat dry as a desert. The state tosses you just enough water to stumble on, not enough to feel human. You pass villages that could be yours, same roofs, same tired faces, but they're not the ones trudging to dig. You catch a farmer's eye and think lucky bastard, even though you know he's got his own woes. Once you're there, it's go time. You're handed a tool pick, axe, shovel, whatever, and pointed at a patch of earth. Dig. The overseers lurk whips coiled, and the sun turns the air into a furnace. Dust sticks to your skin like glue, your hands bleed, and you keep going because stopping isn't an option. It's a brutal rhythm, one that sinks into your bones until you're more machine than man. You push through, driven by fear, hope, or just plain exhaustion. Maybe you'll get out early if you work hard enough. Maybe not. Either way, you swing that tool and dream of home. But hold up, the state's not your only worry. Out here, you're a sitting duck for bandits, those lawless types who've ditched society's rules and picked up swords instead. In the next section, we'll dive into their world, where the whip's bad, but the blades worse. So catch your breath if the dust lets you and get ready for more of medieval China's brutal hits. Picture this. You're trudging along a dirt path, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows across the fields. The air's thick with the scent of wildflowers and something else danger, perhaps. You've heard the whispers, the tales swapped over flickering campfires, bandits lurking behind every hill, waiting to pounce on anyone foolish enough to travel alone. In medieval China, this wasn't just a spooky story to keep kids in line. It was the brutal reality of a world where lawlessness thrived. After the soul-crushing grind of corv labor we talked about last time, digging canals for the emperor's latest ego trip, while your own crops withered its. No surprise, some folks decided to trade their shovels for swords. Why break your back for a system that didn't give a damn if you lived or died? Better to take what you could, even if it meant risking the hangman's noose. Banditry wasn't just a petty annoyance. It was a festering wound on a society already stretched thin. That rigid social hierarchy we explored way back left most people scraping by with nothing to lose. Famine, remember that grim chapter pushed families to the edge and corvy labor snapped what little spirit they had left. It's almost poetic in a twisted way. After months of hauling dirt for some distant lord's vanity project, some workers shrugged and said, "To hell with it." They joined the bandits, figuring a cut of the loot beat a lifetime of nothing. Imagine it like quitting a dead-end job to chase a wild, reckless dream, except this dream came with a blade and a bounty on your head. And oh, did banditry flourish. Take Huang Chao, a name that echoes through the late Tang dynasty like a thunderclap. He started as a salt smuggler, humble beginnings really, but soon rallied a scrappy army of bandits and fed-up peasants. Together, they tore through China, leaving chaos in their wake. It's like a medieval heist movie, all swords and shouting, just missing the snappy one-liners. Huang's rebellion wasn't some small-time robbery. It nearly brought the dynasty to its knees. That's the thing about bandits back then. They weren't just stealing purses. They were shaking the foundations of power. When the systems that cruel you can't blame folks for wanting to burn it all down. Not every bandit was out to rewrite history, though. Some fancied themselves heroes, the righteous bandits of legend. They'd swear they only robbed corrupt officials, tossing a few coins to the poor, like some medieval Robin Hood. It's a charming tale, the kind you'd whisper to yourself when the tax collector came knocking. But let's not kid ourselves. Most of these outlaws weren't auditioning for sainthood. Survival was the game, and if they shared the loot, it was probably more about buying loyalty than playing hero. Still, those stories stuck around a flicker of hope in a world that didn't offer much. Historians love to squabble over this naturally. Was banditry a noble cry for justice or just thuggery with better PR? Some say it was rebellion, a middle finger to the oppression grinding folks into the dirt. Others argue it was pure opportunism. Why not grab what you can when the world's falling apart? Truth is, it was probably both. Desperate times breed desperate measures, right? Picture yourself in their shoes. Your kids are starving the local bigwigs, hoarding rice, and the law's nowhere to be found. Do you bow your head and pray, or pick up a knife and take what's yours? It's a messy question, and the scholars can duke it out while we sip our tea. The government wasn't exactly twiddling its thumbs, mind you. They sent troops to hunt down these troublemakers, banners waving and swords gleaming. But here's the twist: corruption ran so deep that some soldiers doubled as bandits. They'd loot a village, point the finger at the outlaws, and call it a day. It's like a medieval cop show gone wrong, the kind where the good guys and the bad guys swap hats when no one's looking. For you, the average villager, it was a nightmare. Bandits might rob you blind, but the soldiers sent to protect you could be just as bad. Trust was a luxury no one could afford, and danger was as common as the morning mist. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine it you're in your village, the night air cool and still. Suddenly shouts rip through the silence, followed by the pounding of hooves. Bandits swarm in torches, flaring their faces, a mix of greed and desperation. You scramble for anything, a kitchen knife, a pitchfork, and pray it's enough. Smoke stings your eyes as huts catch fire, and the cries of your neighbors pierce the chaos. These weren't polished villains in capes. They rocked ragged tunics and mismatched armor like they'd raided a peasant's laundry line instead of a treasury. Fashion wasn't the priority when you're dodging arrows and living rough, but you've got to admit it's a look grubby chic medieval style. And if bandits weren't enough to keep you up at night, nature was waiting in the wings with its own brand of misery. Floods, earthquakes, droughts, they hit like a sledgehammer. And when the dust settled, bandits were there to pick through the rubble. It's almost like they had a deal with the elements. You shake things up, and we'll swoop in for the spoils. After a disaster, chaos ruled and banditry spiked, turning bad days into outright nightmares. But that's a tale for next time, when we dive into the natural disasters that tested medieval China's endurance like nothing else. So as you settle in for the night, maybe with a candle flickering nearby, think of those lonely roads and torchlit raids. In medieval China, danger wasn't just a possibility, it was a neighbor, always close, always watching. Bandits, soldiers, it didn't matter. Someone was coming for what little you had. Sweet dreams, dear listener. Lock the door and let's hope the wolves, or the outlaws, stay quiet tonight. Picture this. You're jolted awake by a low rumble, the kind that starts deep in your bones and rattles its way up to your teeth. The ground beneath your straw mat trembles, and suddenly your little huddle ready, patched together with hope, and a prayer is shaking like a leaf in a typhoon. You stumble outside barefoot on the cold earth heart, hammering only to see chaos unfolding, trees swaying like drunkards, the ground splitting open like a cracked egg, and your neighbor's house collapsing into a pile of dust and despair. The air smells of wet soil and panic, sharp and heavy. After the bandits and lawlessness we talked about last time, those wolves in human skin prowling the roads, you'd think life might cut you some slack. But no, medieval China had a special knack for piling on the misery, and nature was its star performer, ready to deliver a brutal encore whenever you least expected it. Life here wasn't just tough because of human troublemakers. The land itself was a wild card, dealing out disasters like a deck stacked against you. Floods, earthquakes, droughts, and locust plagues took turns battering the countryside. Each one a fresh reminder that survival was less a guarantee and more a desperate hope. Let's start with the floods. Shall we? The Yellow River, nicknamed China's Sorrow, was the MVP of misery. This wasn't some gentle stream you dip your toes in. It was a beast that could turn on you in an instant. One day, you're coaxing millet from the soil, dreaming of a full belly. The next, a wall of muddy water roars through, swallowing your fields, your home, and half your village. Take the flood of 1332, for instance, a real historical gut punch. Millions drowned, starved, or fell to disease as the river reset the board. It's like nature hit delete on your whole existence, and there you are, knee-deep in muck, wondering why you bothered planting anything at all. Then came the earthquakes, striking with all the subtlety of a cosmic tantrum. No heads up, No warning, just a jolt that could flatten your town faster than you could blink. You're lucky if it's just your roof caving in. More often, it's a frantic scramble through rubble, the air thick with dust, and the wails of the trapped. Here's a quirky twist. People back then reckoned dragons were behind it all. Yep. Giant scaly beasts thrashing underground, upset because someone skimped on their offerings. So you'd see folks tossing rice into crevices or banging gongs to shoo the dragons off, like that convince a mythical lizard to chill out. It's almost endearing until you realize they were deadly serious, and you're next in line to grovel before the imaginary dragon landlord. Droughts. Oh, they were a slow. Burn literally. Months without rain, the sun scorching the earth into a cracked, dusty wasteland. Your crops shrivel up, your goats keel over, and the well's drier than a tax collector's heart. Water turns into liquid gold, and you're chewing on roots, praying for a cloud that never comes. Then, just when you're scraping by, locusts swoop in swarms so dense they darken the sky, chomping through anything remotely edible. It's like nature's grand finale. Oh, you're still standing. Let's see how you handle this. You can almost hear the crunch of their jaws as your last shred of hope disappears down their tiny gullets. The fallout from these disasters was relentless. Your village already wobbly from bandit raids, and hunger could vanish in a heartbeat. Homes, smashed granaries washed away, and disease creeping in like a nosy neighbor who won't leave. Dysentery and cholera thrived in the soggy aftermath of floods, while plague tagged along for the ride, picking off survivors like a grim reaper with a checklist. Starvation loomed too waiting for anyone too weak to fight the odds. You thought your modern landlord was a pain. Try negotiating with a river that's moved into your living room, or an earthquake that's redecorated your house into a pile of sticks. Life wasn't just brutal. It was a masterclass in endurance, and you were enrolled whether you liked it or not. Now here's where the eggheads start squabbling, and it's a fight that's still going strong. Why were these disasters so frequent and so savage? Some scholars point the finger at humans' deforestation, and sloppy farming turned small floods into village wipers, like poking holes in a dam and acting surprised when it bursts. Others say it's all down to nature's dice roll. China's got rivers that love to overflow fault lines, itching to snap, and weather that swings from deluge to desert. So what's the truth? Did you make your bed this messy? Or was it just handed to you that way? Picture the historians duking it out over tea, and scrolls each side smugly, sure they've cracked it. Meanwhile, you're sifting through the wreckage of your life, and the why feels a lot less urgent than the what now. These disasters didn't just break your stuff, they broke your spirit, twisting the way you saw the world. Every tremor, every flood left you jumpy, peering at the sky for signs of doom. A crow caws at sunrise bad omen. Dream of losing a tooth. Better brace yourself. A cloud looks vaguely dragon-shaped. Time to panic. It was a way to wrestle some control from the chaos, to pin the blame on something, anything beyond your grasp. And that's where we're headed next, dear listener, into the shadowy realm of superstition and fear, where every creak in the night was a ghost, and every disaster was a message from the beyond. So as you drift off tonight, imagine the ground steady beneath you, the river calm, the sky clear. Just for a moment, let's pretend nature's taking a nap. You wake to the roosters, crow slicing through the dawn, a sound as sharp as the blade you wish you could afford. The air's thick with mist, and the faint whiff of last night's incense still clinging to your hut like a stubborn guest. You groan joints popping like the bamboo floor beneath you, and glance at the little altar in the corner. A few incense sticks smolder there, their smoke twisting upward, your daily bribe to the ancestors for a shred of good fortune. After the floods, quakes, and famines we waded through in Section 11, you're not taking chances. In medieval China, superstition isn't some quaint hobby. It's your shield against a world that seems to enjoy kicking you when you're down. You stumble outside, dodging the threshold, stepping on it's a rookie mistake like begging a ghost to crash your day. The village hums with cautious life, everyone moving, like they're tiptoeing around a sleeping tiger. Today's planting day, but you're not touching a seed until you consult the almanac. It's a dog-eared relic ink smudged from generations of sweaty fingers packed with warnings and cryptic glyphs. You flip to the 5th lunar month weddings, get a thumbs up, travel's a death sentence, and praise the spirits plantings a go. You exhale tension, easing just a bit. A bad day could curse the harvest, and after last year's deluge drowned your rice, you're not in the mood to test fate. Sure, you roll your eyes at the old folks' tales, but why tempt the heavens? Superstitions? Your constant shadow, here dictating every move. Ghosts are the worst of it, those hungry, spiteful spirits of folks who died messy, drowned in a flood, crushed by a quake, or just forgotten. They're out there plotting in the dark, ready to ruin your crops or haunt your sleep if you slip up. So you set out rice bowls, burn stacks of paper money, and mutter prayers like a tax to the afterlife. It's a full-time job, keeping them off your back, and you're half convinced they're just milking it. But the thought of a vengeful ghost rattling your roof, you'd rather not find out. Then there's the ancestors, your VIP spirits. They're not just gone. They're your cosmic supervisors peering down from wherever dead folks go. You light incense bow until your back aches and whisper their names, begging for a little help or at least a break. It's nice knowing they might be rooting for you, but forget a ritual and you're toast. A skipped offering could mean a sick kid or a field of blight. It's like living with a gang of ethereal landlords who demand rent and respect and threaten eviction with locusts. Here's a solid historical nugget: the imperial examinations. You've heard the rumors, those brutal tests that could turn a dirt-poor farmer's son into a fancy official. But superstition was the secret sauce. Candidates didn't just study. They prayed to Wenchong, the literature god, for a mental edge. They'd wear lucky robes, dodge unlucky foods, like pears, sounds like failure, in Chinese yikes, and sleep with books under their heads, hoping the wisdom would seep in. Some even paid fortune tellers to pick the perfect test day. It's the medieval version of chugging energy drinks and crossing your fingers, except with more incense and less caffeine. Now, for something delightfully weird, demon-quelling gear. Picture this: you're wielding a peachwood sword, a chunky blade carved from a tree believed to scare off evil. You hang it over your door, or swing it during a ritual, feeling like a budget exorcist. Peachwood's the MVP because legend says it's got anti-demon mojo. Or maybe you're burying spirit cash under the floor to pay off the underworld. It's quirky surreal, a bit like waving a stick at a storm and calling it a win. But when life's this brutal, you'll try anything. Scholars love to squabble over this stuff. Was superstition your therapy, a way to tame the chaos of floods and famines? Or was it a sly tool to keep everyone in line? If you're scared a ghost will snitch to the ancestors about your lazy plowing, you might work harder. Some argue it's a mental lifeboat giving you a grip on a slippery world. Others say it's a leash, fear keeping the village humming along. No one's got the final word, and you don't care, you're just trying to plant rice without summoning a curse. Every day's a tightrope walk of rules. Whistle at night, snakes slither in. Point at the moon. Say goodbye to your ears. Sweep on New Year's. There goes your luck. You laugh it off with the neighbors. Well, moon's worth an ear right, but the unease sticks like mud. You're never sure what's nonsense and what's a real threat, and that doubt's a quiet torment. This mess doesn't hit everyone the same, though. Women know they've got their own pile of fears and superstitions to dodge often with sharper edges. That's where we're headed next, into their world of bound feet and impossible expectations. For now, you've got spirits to placate, omens to sidestep, and a field waiting before the sun turns brutal itself. Close your eyes and imagine waking to the gentle clatter of a wooden loom, the air thick with the scent of burning incense and the faint bitterness of steeped tea leaves. A single oil lamp flickers in the corner, its light dancing across the rice paper screens that partition your small world. You shift on a low stool, the coarse weave of your tunic brushing against your skin, your feet bound tight since you were a child throbbing faintly beneath you. Beyond these walls, the bustle of medieval China hums. Merchants shout, carts rumble, and scholars debate Confucian wisdom. But here, your life is quieter, narrower, hemmed in by rules older than the dynasty itself. Last time we wandered through a land of superstition and fear, where every creak in the night was a spirit's whisper. Now you'll see that for women in this era, the real ghosts weren't supernatural. They were the expectations that bound them tighter than any spell. Picture yourself rising at dawn, your day a rhythm of duties as predictable as the seasons. You grind millet for a simple meal that tastes plain but comforting, while the rustle of your silk robia, rare gift from your wedding offers, a fleeting softness against the grind of routine. Your hands move deftly, threading a needle or stirring a pot, because this is your domain, the home, the hearth, the invisible backbone of a family's honor. But step too far beyond it, and the world snaps shut like a clamshell. Society here has a plan for you, and it's not one you get to rewrite. Let's start with your feet, or what's left of them. Foot binding began centuries ago, a trend among the elite that trickled down like a slow poison. You can imagine your mother's face torn between love and duty as she wrapped your toes under at age 6, the bandages tightening until the bones cracked. The goal: a golden lotus a foot, no longer than 3 inches, dainty and prized. The reality: pain that never fully fades, a hobble that keeps you from running, exploring, or even standing too long. It's beauty, they say, but it feels more like a shackle. Men don't bind their feet, of course. They stride freely, while you shuffle, a living symbol of grace and dependence. Then there's marriage, the next knot in the rope. You don't court or flirt. Your parents arrange it all, often before you've outgrown childhood games. Your worth is tallied up. Can you bear sons? Will you obey on your wedding day? Draped in red silk and veiled from the world, you're handed over, like a sealed letter, your future scripted by strangers. You become a daughter-in-law expected to bow to your husband's family, to cook clean and fade into the background. A son cements your place. A daughter is a disappointment. Love might bloom, but it's a bonus, not a promise. You're a cog in a machine, and the machine doesn't care if you're happy. Education, you ask, that's a door mostly closed. While your brothers hunch over scrolls memorizing lines from the Analects to chase imperial exams, you're taught practical arts, embroidery, cooking, maybe a smattering of poetry if your family's generous. Your mind buzzes with thoughts, but there's no outlet unless you're one of the rare ones. Take Li Qingzhao, a poet, whose words dance despite the weight of her world. She scribbled between chores, her verses a quiet rebellion against the silence. She's a spark in the dark, but for most the dark stays heavy. Here's a twist, though a little historical quirk to chew on. Some women flip the script entirely. Empress Wu Zetian, for one, started as a concubine, charmed her way into power, and ruled China outright in the Tang dynasty. She was cunning, ruthless, and brilliant, a woman who turned a man's game into her own empire. History calls her a tyrant. Naturally, success in a skirt doesn't sit well with the chroniclers. But she's proof that even in this rigid world, a few found cracks to slip through. Scholars still tussle over this. Did women like you have any real power? Some say yes, that you whispered influence over tea, nudging your husband's decisions, or shaping your son's future. A soft word here, a clever suggestion there, and maybe you held more sway than the records admit. Others scoff, insisting the system was ironclad, leaving you little room to breathe, let alone rule. It's a tug of war with no clear winner, but you can picture it either way. A bird singing in its cage, or a bird too tired to try. So how do you endure? You find slivers of light, the warmth of a child's giggle, the satisfaction of a well-stitched hem, the rare night when the moon peeks through the window, and you let yourself dream. You trade wry smiles with other women muttering about meddling mothers-in-law, or the absurdity of lotus feet. Beauty's a cruel master, you might say, and the shared laugh eases the ache. It's not freedom, but it's survival, and in survival, there's a stubborn strength. As we drift toward the next chapter, you'll see how these chains didn't just bind you. They stretched to the children, molding their lives before they could choose their own paths. For now, rest in this moment. Feel the lamps glow on your face, the weight of the day easing off your shoulders. These women, with their bound feet and quiet voices, carried a resilience that echoes through time. Sleep well, knowing their story isn't forgotten. Picture this: you're jolted awake by a rooster's crow, a sound that cuts through the quiet like a blunt axe through bamboo. The air is cool, tinged with the earthy smell of wet fields and the smoky hint of a dying fire. You roll off a straw matiti lumpy and about as comfortable as a bed of rocks, and blink into the dimness of a cramped earthen-walled room. You're a child in medieval China, somewhere between the Tang and Ming dynasties, and your morning is already a far cry from the cozy lie-ins of modern life. This is your world, and it's not here to coddle you. Last time we lingered on the women of this era trapped by duty, their lives a tight weave of sacrifice and silence. They were children once, too shaped by the same unforgiving society you're waking into now. For girls, childhood was a fleeting breath before the heavy mantle of womanhood descended. For boys, it was a relentless march toward study and status, a race with no finish line in sight. In medieval China, childhood wasn't a playground of imagination. It was a boot camp for a life that could be as brutal as it was brief. You stumble outside the village, humming to life around you. Women are already hunched over looms or pounding grain, their hands moving with the rhythm of survival. Men trudge to the fields, tools slung over shoulders, bowed by years of labor. If you're a boy, your fate is a schoolroom or, at least a corner, of one, where you'll spend your day wrestling with scrolls and stern teachers. If you're a girl, your classroom is the home your lessons, in weaving, cooking, and keeping quiet. Either way, your future's been decided before you've even figured out who you are. Let's start with the boy's education, Because frankly, it's where the action was, if you call endless memorization action. You'd sit on a cold, hard floor, a bamboo scroll spread out like a judgmental map of your inadequacies. The curriculum Confucian classics, page after page, of moral platitudes about respect, obedience, and the art of not embarrassing your ancestors. You'd recite them until your voice cracked, all under the watchful eye of a teacher whose bamboo cane was less a tool and more an extension of his personality. Mess up a line, and whack a sharp sting across your hand. It was character building, they'd say, but it felt more like a warm-up for the floggings we've already seen dished out to adults. The whole point of this grind was the imperial examination system, the golden ticket out of the mud and into the silk-robed elite. This is your mainstream historical gem, a sprawling network of tests that promise social mobility in a society obsessed with hierarchy. Starting in the Sui dynasty and perfected by the Song. These exams were a gauntlet of hours, sometimes days, of writing essays, crafting poems, and proving you could quote Confucius in your sleep. Pass and you might land a government post, your family's name suddenly worth something. Fail, and it's back to the plow, your scholar dreams rotting in the rice paddies. But here's the catch: passing wasn't just about brains. Money helped tutors books bribes, and without it, you were a minnow in a shark tank. Only about 1 in 100 made it through. And even then, the system loved a well-connected failure over a brilliant nobody. Girls, meanwhile, got a different education, one that didn't involve scrolls or exams, but was no less demanding. Your classroom was the hearth, your teachers, the women who'd gone before you. You'd learn to cook, millet porridge, mend, torn tunics, and bite your tongue skills for a future as someone's wife and mother. But there's a quirky twist here, and it's a grim one: foot binding. It often began in childhood, around 5 or 6, when your mother would take your feet and bind them tight, breaking the bones to reshape them into tiny lotus-like stubs. The pain was relentless, a throbbing companion for years, all for the sake of beauty and a better marriage match. It's a bizarre footnote. Some even thought the smaller the feet, the higher the bride price. Beauty standards medieval style, less about confidence, more about crippling yourself for a man you hadn't met yet. Family was the backbone of it all, a web of obligations that held you tight. You weren't just a kid. You were your parents' legacy, your grandparents' pride, and your village's business. Respect for elders was drilled into you. Questioning them was unthinkable, like questioning the sun's right to rise. Everyone had a say in your upbringing. A misstep didn't just earn you a scolding from your father, but a lecture from the entire neighborhood. It was a collective effort, raising you to fit the mold, and individuality was a luxury no one could afford. Here's where the scholars get feisty. Was this education system a meritocracy or a sham? Some insist it was a rare shot at fairness, a way for a peasant boy to become a mandarin. Others roll their eyes, sure, if that peasant boy had a rich uncle to bankroll him. The reality sits in the messy middle. Yes, a handful of poor kids clawed their way up, but they were outliers. For most, the exams were a mirage shimmering just out of reach. You'd study by candlelight, your stomach growling, knowing the game was rigged before you even picked up the brush. Still, you found ways to steal a little joy. A quick game with a makeshift ball, a splash in the stream when no one was looking, a tall tale from an old uncle. These were your rebellions, your proof that you were more than a pawn. You'd laugh at the absurdity of it, all the rules piled higher than a pagoda, and dream of a life where you called the shots. It wisdom much, but it kept the spark alive. And yet, that spark rarely lasted. Childhood here was a prelude to a harsh adulthood, its lessons, endurance submission, grit preparing you for a world of toil and early ends. The women we left behind last section carried these scars forward, and the men you'd become faced a gauntlet of their own. Which brings us to our next stop, the brutal finish line of life in medieval China, where death was as ordinary as the dawn. So as you drift off tonight, let those childhood dreams lift you, if only for a moment, before the weight of history pulls you back down. You sit on a worn wooden stool outside your modest hut, the setting sun casting long shadows across the village. Your hands gnarled and calloused from decades of toil rest in your lap, like ancient relics of a life spent bending to the will of the land. The air is still carrying the faint scent of cooking fires and the distant murmur of your neighbors, voices you've known since they were children, now grown and weathered like you. As you gaze out at the familiar landscape, memories flood your mind, the backbreaking labor in the fields, the constant threat of famine and disease, the wars that claimed so many lives. You've outlived most of your friends and family, a rarity in this harsh world where few see the far side of 40. It's a strange thing growing old in a place where life is as fragile as a reed in a storm. You shift slightly, feeling the ache in your back, souvenir from years of plowing, planting, and hauling. Your body is a map of the struggles you've endured. The crooked finger, from a poorly set break, the scar on your arm, from a bandit's blade, the cough that lingers from winters spent in a drafty hut. You've buried children, siblings, and friends, some taken by the slow creep of hunger, others by the swift slash of a sword. Death has been your constant companion, lurking in the shadows of every season, every battle, every cough that wouldn't quit. In medieval China, life wasn't just hard. It was a gauntlet, and you've run it longer than most. You remember the floods that swept away entire villages, the earthquakes that cracked the earth like a shattered pot, and the droughts that turned the fields to dust. Bandits roamed the hills, their laughter as sharp as their knives, and the emperor's soldiers weren't much better taking what they wanted and leaving you with less than nothing. The laws were a whip, lashing out at the smallest misstep, and the punishments, floggings, mutilations, executions were as public as they were brutal. You've seen men hanged for stealing a sack of rice, women beaten for speaking out of turn, and children worked to the bone before they could even read. It's a wonder you're still here, still breathing, still watching the sun dip below the horizon. But even now, as the light fades, you know your time is borrowed. Death in this era doesn't come with a warning or a ceremony. It strikes like lightning, sudden and indifferent. One day, you're tending your crops. The next, you're gone, claimed by a fever, a fall, or a blade. There's no grand farewell, no mourners in silk robes, just a quick burial, if you're lucky, or a hasty grave in an unmarked field. You've seen it happen too many times. A neighbor collapses in the marketplace, a friend disappears on the road, a child succumbs to a sickness no healer could name. Life here is a flicker, and death is the wind that snuffs it out. In a world where disease, famine, and violence were constant companions, few live to see old age. Historians estimate that the average life expectancy hovered around 30 to 40 years, but that number hides the brutal truth. Many died in infancy, others in their prime, cut down by the relentless hardships of the time. Warfare alone claimed countless lives, soldiers and civilians alike, while plague swept through villages like a scythe through wheat. Starvation was a specter that never strayed far, its bony fingers clutching at your throat during every lean season. And for those who survived all that, there was always the risk of a stray arrow, a bandit's raid, or a magistrate's wrath. You've beaten the odds, but you know it's only a matter of time before your luck runs out. Still, there's a strange comfort in the inevitability of it all. You've lived long enough to see the cycles repeat the floods, the famines, the wars. You've watched dynasties rise and fall, emperors crowned and dethroned, and through it all your people have endured. There's a resilience in that, a quiet strength that outlasts even the cruelest of times. You've learned to find peace in small things, the warmth of a fire on a cold night, the laughter of children playing in the dirt, the taste of a simple meal shared with those you love. These are the moments that make the struggle worthwhile, the fleeting joys that light the darkness. And when death does come, as it must, you hope its swift a quiet slip into the night perhaps, or a final breath beneath the open sky. You've seen enough to know that not everyone gets that luxury. Some go screaming, others begging, but you've made your peace. You've lived a life forged in hardship, and whatever lies beyond, you'll face it with the same stubborn grit that's carried you this far. In some corners of this land, death isn't the end of the story. There's a quirky custom you've heard of, ghost marriages, where the spirits of the deceased are wed in the afterlife. It's a way to ensure that even in death, no one is left alone, their souls bound together in a union that transcends the grave. You've never seen it yourself, but the thought lingers like a half-remembered dream. Two families mourning their lost children, finding solace in a bond that defies the finality of death. It's a strange comfort, a whisper of hope in a world that offers so little. Historians still argue over the true toll of this era's brutality. Some say the records overstate the violence, painting a picture darker than reality, while others believe they barely scratch the surface of the suffering endured. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between, lost in the dust of time, buried with the countless souls who lived and died without leaving a mark. But you don't need scrolls or scholars to tell you what you already know. Life was hard, and death was harder. As the last rays of sunlight slip below the horizon, you feel a chill settle over the village. The stars begin to prick the sky, faint at first, then brighter, like tiny lanterns guiding the way to whatever comes next. You rise slowly, your joints protesting, and make your way back inside. The hut is quiet now, the fire reduced to embers, the air thick with the scent of smoke and earth. You lie down on your mat, the straw prickling through the thin blanket, and close your eyes. Sleep comes easily these days, a welcome reprieve from the weight of memory. And as you drift off, you can almost hear the wind whispering through the fields, carrying with it the echoes of 1,000 lives lived and lost,